In today's biased news, a near collision with a ship that shouldn't be there in the first place. The Ukraine counteroffensive begins, and the German state sides with Nazis. In Senegal, over a dozen people have died in clashes between riot police and protesters after the Senegalese opposition figure Ousmane Sonko was sentenced in absentia to 2 years in prison following a corruption of youth charge. This disqualifies the politician from running for president and prevents him from appealing the charge. The details include the sexual assault of and threats towards a woman who worked at a massage parlor, which Sonko's supporters claim to be politically motivated. Following the verdict, Sonko's party called for people to take to the streets, as they did in 2021, as a result of the proceedings of the same trial. The current president, Macky Sall, has been criticized for failing to create jobs, and is rumored to attempt a third term as president, despite Senegal's 2-term limit. Sonko currently appears to be his main political rival, stoking further claims of a politically motivated sentence. As a result of the ongoing protests, social media and messaging platforms are being restricted due to the, quote, spread of hateful and subversive messages, and a government spokesperson has stated the protesters have cost the country, quote, millions of dollars and are a threat to Senegalese democracy. This is one of a laundry list of issues facing Senegal, including IMF loans forcing the privatization of water resources, the presence of the US military in the country, as well as French economic pressure through controlling stakes in Senegalese industry. In US-China relations, the US Navy has released a video of what it called an unsafe interaction in the Taiwan Strait, in which a Chinese warship crossed in front of a US destroyer. The rational observer will note that the US vessel is conducting threatening maneuvers approximately 8,000 miles from its own country, while the US has accused the Chinese Navy of spooking their sailors by passing a bit too close. China's defense minister has accused the United States and its allies of trying to destabilize the Indo-Pacific. Russia announced on Monday that its forces had successfully repelled a major Ukrainian offensive in the Donetsk region, killing hundreds of Ukrainian troops. The attack, which occurred on Sunday, targeted 5 points along the front in southern Donetsk. The Russian Defense Ministry stated that Ukraine aimed to break through the Russian-controlled territory, but failed to achieve its objectives. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry and military have not yet responded to the Russian statement. On the flip side, armed groups from Ukraine have launched cross-border attacks into southern Russia. The governor of the besieged Belgorod region acknowledged that pro-Ukrainian forces had taken Russian prisoners of war during these incursions. Earlier, the armed groups released a video showing captive Russian soldiers, and demanded a meeting with Governor Gladkov in exchange for their release. Gladkov agreed to meet if the soldiers were still alive, but the armed groups later claimed to have decided their fate and planned to transfer them to the Ukrainian side for an exchange. India has begun an official investigation into its deadliest railway accident in over 20 years. Initial findings suggest that signal failure may have caused the collision, resulting in the death of at least 275 people and injuring 1,200. The incident occurred on Friday, when a passenger train collided with a stationary freight train, derailed, and subsequently hit another passenger train traveling in the opposite direction. After extensive rescue efforts and track repairs, train services resumed on Sunday night. Over in Europe, a 28-year-old woman named Lena E. and her 3 accomplices have been sentenced to prison for their involvement in a series of attacks on neo-Nazis and right-wing sympathizers in Germany. Lena was sentenced to 5 years and 3 months, while the other activists received prison terms ranging from 27 to 39 months. The court recognized the motive of opposing right-wing extremists, but emphasized that such attacks are still considered serious criminal acts, declaring that the state should maintain a monopoly on the use of force. Defense lawyers argued that the trial was politically motivated, which it was, and called for acquittal. Left-wing groups have announced plans to protest the verdict. One would be wise to remember that all opposition to fascist organizations is, by default, self-defense and morally correct. But as the state holds a total monopoly on violence, history has shown it's important to keep one's identity hidden while undertaking clandestine anti-fascist action. Of course, First Thought does not condone or encourage any such action. In occupied Palestine, 3 Zionist soldiers were killed in a shooting along the border with Egypt, prompting a manhunt and the eventual death of the gunman. The border between Egypt and Israel is generally quiet. Egypt signed a peace agreement with the apartheid regime in 1979, and the two maintain close security ties. making fighting along their shared border rare. Israel had previously constructed a fence along the border to prevent the entry of African migrants, as part of their goal to establish an ethno-state. And in positive news of the day, a drug called osimertinib, marketed as Tagrisso, has been found to reduce the risk of death by 51% in patients with a specific type of lung cancer. The clinical trial involved 680 participants from over 20 countries who had undergone surgical removal of their tumor. Half of the participants received the drug, while the other half received a placebo. After 5 years, 88% of patients who took osimertinib were still alive, compared to 78% of those who took the placebo. The drug is already authorized in many countries for various indications, and has been administered to around 700,000 people. That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. If you'd like to see episodes with more in-depth analysis, consider supporting the show on Patreon so we can grow and expand.